How good was Jon Jones actually? Jon Bones Jones is without a doubt one of the greatest MMA fighters to ever compete. Jones dominated the UFC Light Heavyweight Division for the last decade with little to no challenge. Recently, there has been a lot of talk in the MMA community about who is the greatest of all time. Names like the recently retired Khabib and GSP were names that were brought up. Well, when Jon got wind of these talks and heard his name was left out, he was quite perturbed, even making a video responding to the conversation along with a few other colorful tweets, mostly going back and forth with his nemesis DC. A very small group of fans have even gone so far as to question if Jon is even that good. Well, for that vocal minority, let's give them a little history lesson on one of the greatest fighters of all time. For this video, we're going to answer the question of how good was Jon Jones actually? We're going to go through his long undefeated career and show you his evolution as one of the greats. Jones made his UFC debut less than a year into his MMA career when he just turned 21. He won his debut by decision, but he would start to get the MMA world talking after his second UFC bout. Jon would go up against fan favorite and the Ultimate Fighter 1 veteran Stephsn Bonnar. Nobody knew who he was, but UFC fans were about to find out. From the beginning of the fight to the end, Jones dominated Bonnar using superior athleticism and wrestling, landing everything from big suplexes to spinning back elbows. With his performance against Bonnar, Jon put everyone to notice and looked to potentially be the next big star. His next 4 fights would be nothing but domination by Bones, improving drastically between each fight and outclassing his opponents in every facet of the fight game. The last of these 4 wins would be against the Ultimate Fighter winner, Ryan Bader, to determine who would fight for the title. Bader was a highly touted conference champion wrestler in college, but Jones beat him at his own game, finishing the Ultimate Fighter with a guillotine choke in the second round. After winning 6 of his 7 UFC fights, Jon was ready for his shot at the title. He would face Shogun Rua, who was one of the few fighters to win both a UFC and Pride championship. When his moment on the big stage came, Jon wasn't shook by the moment at all, delivering one of the best performances of his career. Starting off the fight with a flying knee, bringing the fight to the champion that was usually the aggressor. He had Shogun off balance from the beginning, landing multiple takedowns with devastating ground and pound. With Shogun exhausted from Jones's swarming offense, eventually forcing a stoppage in the 3rd round, at just 24 years old, Jones became the 2nd youngest Ultimate Fighting champion in history. But this was only the beginning. Jon was just getting started on his legacy and would evolve his skills to yet another level. Jon Jones's first title reign would last over 4 years, defending his title 8 times during that span. His first challenge would be against former champion Rampage Jackson. In this fight, Jones showed further growth in his striking game, adding his patented and notorious oblique kick. Jones would land this kick flush within the first minute of the fight, damaging Rampage's leg and slowing his movements. With Rampage's movement affected, Jones began to systematically pick the former champ apart, much like his other fights, landing takedowns and strikes at will, eventually securing an RNC in the 4th round to retain his title. It was more of the same in his next defense, as he choked Lyoto Machida unconscious with a guillotine choke. After this submission win, Jon would defend the belt 5 more times before meeting Daniel Cormier. The last Jones fights we will highlight are his 2 fights against his nemesis Daniel Cormier. These fights were grudge matches with a lot of bad blood between the two going into them. They also really show what a special fighter Jon really is. In his first match, Cormier gave Jones trouble in the first couple rounds of the match. His wrestling and clinch work brought a real challenge to Jones that he hadn't seen, being able to use his wrestling to land big shots and land big takedowns. But Jon, being the special fighter he is, was able to adapt quickly within the fight. He was able to use his reach to cancel out Cormier's wrestling and land highly technical strikes. Jones proved too much for Daniel and took the decision in the first fight. When they met again 2 years later for their second fight, it was a similar story. Cormier pressed Jon at the beginning like in the first fight, landing good strikes on the champ. Then, Jon was able to adapt again, shutting down Daniel's striking game and keeping him at the end of his punches. Jones hit Cormier with the same head kick as the first fight, but this time it was more flush, rocking Cormier and giving Jones the opening to finish him with strikes. Many already considered Jones the greatest light heavyweight ever before this performance. Afterwards, nearly everyone agreed on that, along with him being one of the all-time greats. From the beginning of his career until now, Jon Jones has evolved as a fighter like no other. So why is Jon's legitimacy being questioned, or how good he actually is? Well, there's a few reasons for this, so let's go over why. Reason number 1, failed drug tests. Jones has had many, let's say, complications with quite a few different drug tests. He tested positive for turinabol in his second fight against Cormier and was stripped of his title. Then, in his returning fight with Gustafsson after the positive test, there were more abnormal findings in another drug test, picograms of the same substance that led him to being stripped of the title. This time, the UFC didn't strip him and actually moved the entire UFC 232 show from Nevada to California. Testing positive for steroids twice made many fans question Jon's legitimacy. Reason number 2, fighting down to competition. Jon didn't have the greatest outings in his last 3 title defenses, not because he was challenged, but because he fought down to his competition. Jones was clearly unmotivated and was fighting to defend his title rather than to win the fights. It almost cost him against Santos, squeaking out of a split decision, then winning a decision against Reyes, but due to a judging error, it was actually a majority draw. He should have a draw on his record, and this is due to him choosing not to perform at his best. For some fans, these less than stellar performances take him out of the conversation for greatest of all time of MMA, feeling that an all-time great never just coasts to victories. Reason number 3, sheer dislike of Jones. The last reason Jon's naysayers don't consider him the greatest of all time has nothing to do with his abilities. They just don't think he's a good person. Jon has had many personal problems, from DUIs, DWI, DIP, hit and runs, and cocaine possession. Jones has been given many more chances than anyone and seems to keep getting into trouble. For this, some don't consider him to be the greatest of all time. So, after we highlighted the best of Jon's career and the negatives, let's answer the question. The answer is, Jon Jones is one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. No matter how you feel personally about Jon doesn't change this fact. Do those that cite his failed drug tests have a fair point? Yes, but many need to understand something important. There is not a drug on this planet that can give you the talent and physical gifts that Jon has. He is a once-in-a-generation talent that is one of the most complete fighters there has ever been. Along with his physical abilities, the mixture of his striking and grappling ability is second to none. Not only that, but his fight IQ is among the best there has ever been. It is amazing to watch his ability to adapt in real time during the fight, always being in control and having his opponent exactly where he wants them. So, to answer the question, the answer is absolutely yes. Jon Jones is really that good. For those still questioning Jon's legitimacy, just know that there is a whole other chapter to his career coming. Jon is looking to make his heavyweight debut for the title against the winner of the Stipe Francis rematch. In recent Instagram posts, Jon has shown that he has transformed his body in preparation for this heavyweight run, putting on 240 pounds of muscle, and reportedly has not lost any of his speed. If he is able to become a two-division champ, it will add another mark in his stellar career. Without a doubt, he should be considered one of the greatest fighters, if not the greatest fighter, of all time.